Hey everyone, it's Carissa. Welcome to Satur-YAY. We are celebrating the weekend by getting our craft on. And today we're going to do some Copic coloring on vellum. It is one of my favorite Copic techniques and it is super easy and gives you a completely different look. Now I'm going to be using this stamp set from Flora and Fauna. It is called the Oh Hello Friend. I love the whimsical feel of these flowers and I love that Oh Hello Friend sentiment. And I'm going to be doing some masking as I stamp today. So I've started out with some Inkadinkado stamp masking paper and I'm stamping my flower and leaf images onto this stamping mask paper in just some pale gray ink. And then I'm going to use my scissors and just fussy cut those out because I want to cut them as close to the edge as I possibly can. And you'll notice here as I'm cutting, I'm actually moving the paper more than I'm moving the scissors, and that'll help you get a better fussy cut line. So these are going to come in handy not only for the masking, but to kind of prepare my layout for all of these stamped images. So I'm just kind of playing with these masks and kind of getting an idea for where I want to stamp everything. And I did go ahead and stamp one more grouping and cut those out so that I could get a really good feel. And I did know I was going to need a second mask for the smaller flower. Now, once I got my layout kind of figured out, I went ahead and snapped a picture with my cell phone, and you saw me and my husband there. Aren't we cute? And then I'm going to use that picture for reference as I begin to stamp my images. Now, I am going to be white heat embossing these on this vellum. This is the Essentials by Ellen Vellum. So I went ahead and prepped the surface of the vellum using my EK Success powder tool. I stamped my first flower. That's the one that's going to be the furthest forward in this grouping of flowers. I stamped that in Versamark ink and then I covered it with some super fine detail white embossing powder. And I did have a little bit of embossing powder where I didn't want it, so I just took a dry brush and brushed that away before I heat set it. Now, once I have this image down, this is the very frontmost image in my grouping, I'm going to mask that off and I'm going to start stamping the ones that are going to be directly behind it. So I'm just trying to figure out how this mask goes on to the image here. And then once I have that masked, I'm going to re-prep the surface of my vellum and continue on with my next stamped image. So this is the smaller flower. Once again, I am going to ink this up in some Versamark ink and then I'm going to stamp it where it's overlapping that masked image there. And then once again, just like I did before, I'm going to go ahead and add my super fine detail white embossing powder and then heat set it. Now you're going to want to re-prep the surface of the vellum each time you stamp these because you are touching the vellum and that leaves some grease or oils from your fingertips on the vellum. And also, even though that is a low tack adhesive on the back of these masks, it can leave a little bit of residue behind and cause some embossing powder to stick where you don't want it. So I do recommend prepping between each step of this. It does take a little bit more time to do that, but I think the end result is totally worth it. And you're going to see I pull off the masks before I add my next layer of embossing powder. That's just because I don't want to have to deal with them as I'm putting that embossing powder on. I don't want it to get stuck behind the masks or on the mask where I don't see it and then transfer to my project. So now I have all of these flowers stamped, a really nice grouping there. I continued to mask and stamp and prep the surface of my vellum and emboss. And now I'm going to finish up with my sentiment that says, "Oh, hello, friend." Once again, I prepped the surface of that vellum. I stamped it in the Versamark ink, and now I'm covering it in some white, super fine detail embossing powder. Now, when you're embossing on vellum, make sure that your heat tool is good and hot before you take it to the vellum. That's going to prevent some of the warping that you might be experiencing when you're heat embossing on vellum. So now it's time to get to our Copic coloring on this vellum, and I do recommend kind of taking a scratch piece of vellum and testing out the colors on the vellum because you are going to get kind of a more muted or softened back effect when you're looking at these colors through the vellum. And you do want to do your Copic coloring on the back side of this because if you touch the tips of your Copic markers to that embossing that's on the front of this vellum, you're going to take away that embossing that you did. It's going to etch away at that embossing, and it's also going to ruin the tips of your Copic markers. So do not color on the front side, color on the back side. The other advantage of that is that sometimes when you're coloring with Copics on vellum, you can get like a streaky kind of look, but when you look through the vellum at that coloring, that's going to diffuse the color and take away some of that streakiness that you get. In fact, I don't think you see the streakiness at all when you look through the vellum at the coloring. Now, I did want to mention that you will want to use Copic markers or some sort of other alcohol ink marker for this, because the alcohol base of that ink will allow this ink to dry really quickly on the slick surface of this vellum. So now I'm just finishing off the coloring here. You can see I had a purple flower in there. I finished off with the 2 little blue flowers on the end, and I didn't like it. But don't worry, there is a way to fix it. You do not have to scrap this. I'm taking an alcohol prep pad. This is just the kind that you use like before you give yourself a shot or whatever. You can use regular alcohol out of a bottle, just don't totally saturate your project. And I'm just rubbing away at that color, and it is moving the color because it is an alcohol-based ink. That rubbing alcohol is moving the ink away. And then I'm going to go in with this purple color instead. So now that I have gone ahead and colored them all, I'm just reinforcing some of those colors, kind of intensifying them a little bit by going over them. And then I'm going to create kind of a blue cast around this grouping. And I'm starting out with a really light BG marker. I will have all of the markers listed in the classroom and linked for you, so be sure to head on over there for the Copic colors that I used. But I decided that that was a little too light, so I went in with a darker marker, just really loosely and freely, and I have a little bit darker line around there. It's kind of a little bit of an intense line, but to soften that line back out, I'm going in with that lighter color of BG marker and just kind of blending it out and just kind of creating a really nice blue haze around my grouping there. Now, I kind of fussed with the thought of layering this over some pattern paper. I decided not to do that so that the coloring would really take center stage, but I did want to create a fun edge on the bottom of this. So what I'm doing is I am just using my trimmer to cut up to the stamped image about 1/4 of an inch in, and then I skipped over the stamping and then cut from the right edge to the edge of the paper. Does that make sense? So I skipped all those stamped images in between, and then I'm just going back in with my scissors and just fussy cutting around that edge. And this is going to give me a nice fun shaped edge to the lower right hand corner of this card. It's just something a little different. I could have left it as it was, or I could have trimmed straight through the stamping to have those images hang off of the edge of that rectangle, but I thought this was a fun alternative. Now, to attach this piece of vellum onto my card front, I am going to use some foam adhesive, and I'm just hiding it behind that really dense area of embossing. And I'm going to use some tape runner adhesive to apply a strip of this black and white pattern paper. And then I just removed the backer and put that vellum piece right onto my card front. And my card front today is made out of some Essentials by Ellen linen cardstock. Now I got that all done. I got my sequins applied with my multi-medium matte finish, and I decided I did not like that purple flower. So I'm just going in once again with an alcohol swab, and I'm removing that color. Now you're going to see a haze of that color still on there. It may not take the color completely off, but then when I go in with this pink marker instead, you're going to see that that covers it really well. Now you can also remove color using your colorless blender or colorless blender solution, and that's what I'm doing here. This is helpful when you need to get into really tight areas. So I'm just softening up some of that purple on those outer little flowers, and then just to get that extra ink off of the tip of my colorless blender, I'm scribbling it off on some scratch paper. Now to finish my card off and give it just a little more shimmer, I'm going over those larger flowers there in the corner with my Spectrum Noir clear glitter brush overlay pen, and that just gives it a soft little shimmer here. And you can see the beautiful, almost watercolored feel that you get by coloring with Copic markers on the back of that vellum. As always, I will have links to all the products I used in this project over at the Classroom blog, and I'll have that linked below. So be sure you head on over there for more still shots, more information, and a complete list of supplies. I will have links to the featured supplies in the description at YouTube. All of these products are available for purchase at ellenhutson.com. As always, thanks for stopping by. I hope you enjoyed this project, and until next time, I hope you have a fabulous day.